Good morning all. It is our first class on this version, and the situation actually demands for this particular platform that we have to follow at this moment. In this particular method, that means what I'm trying to suggest here is our lesson would be on Macbeth. Do you know, Shakespeare's Macbeth is considered to be the typical Shakespearean tragedy. So fundamentally, before going to the text in our introduction, we need to know something about the patterns of tragedy that Shakespeare wrote, and what are the basic differences between classical tragedy and the Shakespearean tragedy. That means a Shakespearean tragedy and its classical counterpart. Fundamentally, whenever we are thinking, we think of tragedy, as I have already discussed while it was in your first sem. There was a description about the classical concept of tragedy, because we have already gone through Aristotle's Poetics, and there we have already traced what Aristotle opined regarding the concept of tragedy. Now, what is the basic difference between Aristotelian concept of tragedy and Shakespearean tragedy lies in the particular fact that in case of Aristotle, you see, that means in case of Greek and Roman plays, the primary focus is vested on it is the concept of destiny, you see, because what it says, fundamentally, Aristotelian form of tragedy deals with Greek plays, as I have already mentioned. It was Sophoclean tragedy, and there was Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides. And what happens, that their fate was governing. That means fate was considered to be ruling people, as we have already discussed in Oedipus. Then I have already mentioned that Shakespearean tragedy were completely different from its classical counterpart. That means the Greek and Roman tragedy, obviously. Now, what happens, that Elizabethan England, okay, and its representations in the Shakespearean plays, somehow very important, though you can find that the story matter of Macbeth and Hamlet and Othello and King Lear, the famous 4 tragedies written by Shakespeare, it was not dealing with the contemporary England. Somehow it is, or these texts are taken from, or the story matters are taken from the ancient literature. As we know that in case of Macbeth, the focus is on the story matter of Macbeth and Duncan and others. It is taken from Holinshed's Chronicle, Raphael Holinshed's Chronicle, yes. What I'm trying to suggest here, that the basic difference between classical tragedy, that is Greek tragedy in general, and obviously there are the references of Roman tragedy, and Shakespearean tragedy lies in the particular fact that in case of Shakespearean tragedy, the fundamental focus is vested on the character. That means what I'm trying to suggest here, that the tragic hero is to some extent solely responsible for his own downfall. Now, when Shakespeare is dealing with his major tragedies, fundamentally say Macbeth, Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, if you think logically, then you will find that Hamlet is dealing with a particular problem. Macbeth is also dealing with that. Okay, the problems are different, obviously, but the problems within the characters are always at focus. Say, probably you remember the concept of hamartia that Aristotle mentioned in his Poetics. That is the error of judgment, or maybe what we can transfer to the concept of tragic flaw. Think about Macbeth then. What is Macbeth's problem? If you consider on Macbeth's problem, then you will find that Macbeth is over ambitious. Okay? Think of Othello. What is the problem in Othello? Othello is to some extent over suspicious. Okay, right? That's why he is killing Desdemona. And think of Hamlet. The primary problem in Hamlet is Hamlet's indecisiveness. That means he cannot take any proper decision, right? So if you think of King Lear, King Lear is a king. He is the epitome of arrogance, right? And that's why he cannot foresee the future. That's why he's providing his trust. He's feeling about Goneril and Regan. He cannot foresee the future, and his distrust on Cordelia leads to his ultimate destruction. So that is the fundamental differentiation. That means there is the basic thing, that in case of Oedipus, you have found that the primary focus is given on fate, obviously, because Oedipus didn't have any choice, right? But whereas in case of Shakespearean plays, we fundamentally think on Shakespearean patterning of representing characters who are suffering from some moral flaw or maybe the flaw within the character. That is the fundamental focus. And probably you know that somehow in Shakespearean plays we can find that there are direct representations of horror and bloodshed. And that particular thing can also be traced in Shakespeare's Macbeth, because it was there in Othello, it was in King Lear, it was in Shakespeare's Macbeth, and it was in Hamlet altogether. But if you think of Oedipus, for example, can you find any one reference where any bloodshed is being shown on stage? No. Why you cannot find this? Because the Greek writers, okay, Aeschylus, Sophocles and Euripides, they always thought about the finer feelings, you see. That means if the horror and bloodshed would be shown on stage, then they considered that it might affect the finer feelings of the spectators, okay. And when you think of Shakespeare's plays, you will find that somehow the Roman dramatist, his name is Seneca. This Senecan influence is always being traced in Shakespeare. Fundamentally, when you think of Macbeth, when you think of Othello, when you think of King Lear, and obviously it is Hamlet, you will find that these plays are also showing the typical Senecan reference. That means horror and bloodshed, that means the matter of revenge, that is the revenge tactics, okay? And these things have been taken into consideration. But what is more important in Shakespeare that I have already traced, I have already mentioned, that Shakespearean plays are highly psychological. That means the characters, that whenever you are thinking, you will find of the ancient literature, the ancient texts, you cannot find such kind of psychological orientations are always in work. What I'm trying to suggest here, let's say for example, if you go through the typical English drama of the medieval period, you will find that there are some references of abstractions. What is abstraction? Abstraction refers to the presentation of characters who are actually some abstract concepts. I will deal with them while I will go through Dr. Faustus, because it is a morality play, it is a Christian morality play, and we will find references where the typical orientations of morality is being discussed in Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. That is the fundamental thing, that is abstractions. Abstractions means the abstract concepts. Say for example, in those plays, there are the multiple references of mystery plays and miracle plays and morality plays, okay. So fundamentally you will find some abstract concepts. Say for example, there is a character whose name is pride. There is a character whose name is covetousness. There is a character whose name is, say, wrath, W-R-A-T-H. Okay, so these are the abstract concepts. Fundamentally, if you think of any particular character, okay, you will find that somehow a character is guided by some of his emotions. when it is dealing with the psychological part, you will find that if you think of any particular character, one particular psychological trait becomes more powerful, that actually dominates the character. So that's why in the medieval plays we can find the abstractions being incorporated. That means whenever, say for example, if you get a character like Pride, you will find that all the character, that means the basic characteristics of the character, it will be dealing with the pride itself. Say a character he is referring to as lechery, okay, that we find in the 7 deadly sins in Dr. Faustus. You will find that this man, that is the abstraction that is being presented on stage, this man is out and out a lecherous man because he is representing lechery. So these were the medieval plays, you see, that is in the medieval period you can find there are the references of morality plays, and there you can get these characters or abstractions. What Shakespeare did, as I consider, that whenever Shakespeare dealt with such kind of representation, such kind of presentations, we find that the characters are not abstractions obviously, but that particular trait of a character is being presented as prominent. That's why, say for example, if in the medieval play there was a reference of ambition or maybe over ambition, because it was an abstraction, a character named Ambition. In case of Macbeth, you will find that there is a character named Macbeth. It might be Mr. X or Mr. Y, but ultimately the focus is given on that particular character trait or the psychological trait. That means this man is referring to his the concept of over ambition. Or think of Hamlet, you will find that Hamlet is referring to indecision. That's why the famous phrase, that is to be or not to be, that is the question. মানে কাজটা করব নাকি করব না সেটা নিয়ে আর কি. So think of Othello, you will find that Othello is referring to some extent he is suspicious, because in the say for example if you think of the medieval play, you will find that there is an abstraction that is named as suspicion. So here that particular trait is being transferred to a man, that is Othello, and in his psychological traits we can find that the suspicion becomes the predominating emotion, predominating psychological trait of this man. Similar is in the case of Hamlet, who is suffering from indecision. Similar is in the case of King Lear, who is suffering from a kind of, say, lack of foresightedness that is he has, or what he has. And obviously he is an arrogant man who is to some extent self-hubrised. That means he is thinking high about himself, because I am the king, so everyone must be subdued, must have to be subdued by me. So Shakespeare is always dealing with them. Another important trait that I have traced in Shakespearean plays, that is the reference of the supernatural. Okay, fundamentally in Macbeth you will find that supernatural trait is being considered in great detail. Similar is in the case of Hamlet. There is the ghost of senior Hamlet, that is Hamlet's father, being incorporated. Somehow these are different issues, okay, while I will deal with Shakespearean witches. Also, for example, the fundamental importance of the witches in Macbeth, then I will talk about this in great detail. Another important thing, that means so fundamentally the primary focus of this particular play, as I have already discussed, these will be dealt with Shakespearean presentation of characters, Shakespearean presentation of society that it portrays. Somehow Shakespeare is taking the ancient tales and he is changing them according to his own time, okay, and there is the flaw within the character and the treatment of supernatural that is being in work in Shakespearean plays in general. Okay, so it is the first section, that is the introductory section. There are different kinds of introduction that I have to go with, and I will speak about them in great detail in the next section. Okay.